welcome to our interview series In Conversation With. This series is to provide you with some insights and play a role in the dialogue about challenges and the solutions in these unprecedented times. I'm Stephanie Dreyer, and together with Giorgio Priester, we will conduct this series. Our guest today is Isabella. She's the CEO of the Excellent Research, a research institute and advisory specializing in applied science and in the public sector. Isabella, thanks so much for taking the time today. Now, as you're leading a team of researchers, please tell us, what were your observations of the public sector in 2020? I mean, it was a crazy year, and we are still continuing with this craziness in 2021.
Well, the observations in 2020 and continuing in 2021 is basically that the emergency response teams, meanwhile, are running into a fatigue, not just like citizens, but also the teams, because basically there were no weekends, there were no vacations times, nothing like that. And many felt, I would say, not well enough prepared. And that's for a special reason, that the typical audit courts across the world, I would say, our observations is not like entirely across the world, but the picture is similar everywhere. The audit courts used to tell public administration to cut down on everything, especially also on reserves. Also the public budgets for preparation of teams, for training, for emergency response, and so forth. So what they now see is that they were not equipped well enough in terms of resources and in terms of their own training also. So basically they had to quickly put something together for the worst crisis in 100 years. And what I found stunning is that 1 month into the crisis, in the very beginning, like in March 2020, as an example, in Vienna, the public audit court, without being asked for it, by the way, said, in the media, in an interview, that they, of course, because of this crisis, they will revise their audit practice for the future, because they see that reserves are paramount in order to be prepared for crisis. And what we see is that if you compare how well the various municipalities and nations also came out of the crisis and through the crisis, is basically that the ones with the better reserves, with the more ICU beds, with the more training, with more staff in the health sector, they did comparatively well, and the others did comparatively worse.
Does anybody know what is the next thing coming?
Mm-hmm.
Is it a pandemic? Is it any other kind of emergency? How public administrations can think about and prepare themselves to face things that are unknown?
Mm-hmm. This is a very important point. Thank you, Giorgio, to consider this also, because that the presence of permanent crisis like Israel would be like the prime example, but also the US. The US is also so huge that they do have basically a crisis every couple of weeks somewhere, like Hurricane Katrina, and then there were many different things, now Corona and 9/11. So this is really a huge challenge, and the approach to prepare for such challenges is different. If you look at the US and Israel, Israel has a very proactive and also budgeted response for preparation to crisis, because they know they will have it and they want to be well prepared. In the US, we see a much more strict budgeting regime toward cost cutting and cutting of spending. And this also goes into cutting emergency response. So basically, what we thought is necessary or might be necessary is for also like leaders in municipalities to have this conversation with politics for future preparedness, because the municipality themselves, they can't just go out and change the current budgeting policy because it's a fiscal issue, it's a finance issue. And national budgets or city budgets will have to cater to that. And so there will be the need to build awareness in the political arena.
What do you think about, in reality, when emergency occurs, it's not one organization that is involved, it's many organizations.
Mhm.
Could be healthcare, social services, administration, whatever, army, and so on. So preparing as a community, to team and work together, and the background IT support, wouldn't it be a great investment area?
You have two types of leadership. You get the peacetime leadership and the wartime leadership. And ideally, the leaders are the same. They just know to differentiate between the two times. And the peacetime leader prepares for the wartime because it will be coming. That's the one thing. And there will be also another type of management and leadership needed in crisis. You call it staff management, like in the military. And like if you look at the city of Vienna, then they have also in peacetime prepared a partnership between emergency response, like the Red Cross and the fire brigades, the police, military, the city units for all kinds of, from the health service across to the emergency response team and construction, whatnot, logistics. And so you have, like in the military, you have different teams prepared and trained to work together in crisis. So it's not that they have to invent this once the crisis hits, but they train this in peacetime for whenever there's terror attack in the middle. Vienna had a terror attack in the middle of the corona crisis. So this you can only do in a safe manner if you have the proper preparation. And this also, of course, needs funding and awareness and authorization by the mayor and the city council and whatever.
You also mentioned that the funds are very important. And of course, now at the moment, everybody is asking for new funds because, the pandemic is one part of the crisis. It's a health crisis, but at the same time, you have the economic crisis and also all these other collateral damages that are happening right now. So are we even prepared for this?
Basically, almost no one is really well prepared for what comes after. And I think what we also spoke in the preparation of the interview, where you sent this very interesting question, what comes next and what comes after the crisis. There will be, after the health crisis, there will be obviously the economic crisis and also a depression crisis, like a depression in terms of economics and in terms of psychological. What we see is that you have very different preparation of economies, like national and also municipal types of urban economies that are better prepared because they moved a lot into the digital realm. Like the small businesses have their digital twin online. They went to go and sell their whatever products they were selling on platforms and put up their web shops and gave themselves, like the German web shops had now the AT domain and the IT domain and the France domain, and it was selling their running shoes all over Europe because suddenly people were buying the running shoes online. And the little shops in the side streets were closing down. And the problem that I now see is that how to convince the zombie economy, who's just sitting there now waiting for a government bailout, and then after thinking the pedestrian customers will come back to brick and mortar, to the present shop. And it's not going to happen because what the zombie economy does, it thinks afterwards life will resume as it was before. But while Corona was raging, the world has moved on. The customers have moved online, and they're buying their stuff on Amazon and elsewhere, and they got used to it. Now they have this account. Even my dad, it's like on eBay, on everywhere, it's like looking around because now I cannot go out. And so it's like 80 plus years, and it's like shopping online, and finds this is like really grand because he saves himself so much time. And he's not the only one. And I think they're trying to convince businesses to make the step, make the investment instead of like sitting duck waiting for the better day that is maybe not coming. I think there's a challenge also for also the digital units in municipalities to help drive the digitalization in the economy, in the urban economy.
If you live in a city, okay, even in a small city, but or even more in a large city, in reality, you live in an area of the city. By living, I mean maybe you work elsewhere, but you live in a specific area. You know your shops, you know the people working in the shops, and let's say human behavior would put you to be in contact with those people rather than writing an order through any e-commerce organization. Now, I heard some pilots coming around Europe, and I am very curious to understand how they can be successful. The first pilot, which is very well known all around Europe and the world, is the 15 minutes design of the city where everything should be around your home at 15 minutes walk, whatever it is. The second one, which is coming, I heard a couple of examples in Italy. I'm sure there are many around the world, which is local shops associating themselves in creating the local at least a window of goods for the people so that they know. Is it something that you think would be worthwhile pursuing?
On the spreadsheet, they seem not to work out in terms of like being a success, put it shortly, because the units are themselves too small. And the city of Paris, for instance, they have such an subsidy program where they support these small businesses in the neighborhoods, typical also traditional businesses that have been there, like from the butcher and like a cafe and whatever. They could not afford those types of rent payments, and they have a standard program where they support these neighborhood shops. So actually, very generously. And this way, Paris has still the opportunity to have very lively neighborhoods. And I think, honestly, this can be a very promising program to urban areas, like a promising way to spend also city budgets, because on the other hand, it will keep the employment in the urban area also up and running. And currently, if people buy on like some digital platform internationally somewhere, this doesn't really help the employment in the urban area. So that's the afterthought that is also probably still, or still needs to happen in the conversation with the citizens, that the responsibility is mutual.
You already mentioned that sort of there's not only the economic crisis to think about, but also on a society level, the depression, anything that happens regarding mental health, and how we deal with this kind of crisis, because it's been going on for much longer than anybody thought. Is it possible that the municipalities, the public sectors in general, all these organizations can be on sort of fighting fires everywhere, or do they have to first let's start with the economy and then focus on the next thing? Does it have to be sort of a pronged approach, or do you think they can do it one after the other?
Honestly, I think municipalities will try to do both after the crisis, or like already trying to do that now, but not exactly working very well while people are still in a lockdown. You can't really explain how to get out of the depression. And we know from the medical research that just the sheer being locked away is a reason for the depression. And so municipalities will need to um, um, come out of their homes again after the crisis and meet others, which will be a challenge. And we thought in our conversation group here that the cultural aspect of like theater and arts, performing arts, especially music and entertainment industry, could help make like a quicker restart in terms of reuniting people in the public place or public space to motivate people to come out of their homes and join gatherings again if it's fun, entertaining, and positive. Because I think just speaking about you should go for a walk and eat healthy and meet people, it's probably a bit too dragged out. So if it's fun and positive and something interesting, then people will join eventually. So we thought that artists may have, although they were one of the worst off in the crisis, may play a major role in reuniting citizens.
Now everybody's confined to their own home and working from home, so it must be also, sort of a big challenge for companies to reunite their workforce and have that kind of feeling of cohesion, or kind of, sort of like I mentioned, team spirit, so that you can also work together in the office again.
Working at home has less of the interruption culture that we have at offices predominantly, and so productivity levels are up, definitely. So people save the way to work, they save the commute, and they save the time of concentrating back after an interruption. So we may see a hybrid culture of like 2 days at home and 3 days at the office or something like that in the future, and work well, and this may work well. And the other thing is that leaders need to learn and also experiment how to manage a hybrid culture in order to also integrate those who sit at home for 2, 3 days, or maybe also for all the 5 days. And the interesting thing is we had a conference with the CTO of Zoom, and he said something very interesting, that because they monitor with peer groups to see how they use the platform, and he said they found that teams that are used to work together in like an open space office and they communicate a lot all day, that they set up the same thing now at the home office. So in the morning they switch on their laptop and the screen and they go into the video conference, and the video conference is on 8 hours. And one stands up and says, I'm going for a coffee. Are you guys also having one? And then they chat a little bit and then they will keep working. And they said, like the Zoom people said, well, seems to work well for those guys. So there is also other options that are being experimented now, which I found really promising, is to have a laptop with the face in the meeting room instead of the person. So it's not just like one screen and all these many little boxes, but there's like a laptop standing instead of me being there, and my face is on this laptop. So that I have a seat in the conference. And it also appears different to the other colleagues. But overall, it will be definitely a challenge for leadership to integrate everyone at home and at the office in a hybrid work culture for the cohesion that we need in the workplace. So probably we'll have this one day at the office where everyone will gather, something like a lot of experimentation, and I think the big solutions are to come yet.
In your opinion, the sense of community, the social community, not the social networks, the social community, uh, has it been weakened or strengthened during this period? I mean, do people feel more belonging to something than they did before? Or, uh, I mean, work, I mean, friends, home, neighbors, my people living in an apartment close to me that I usually meet at the elevator and say good morning. What do you think? Does it change anything?
We know that people get attached to those other people who they are most in contact with. So there we see actually the challenge of like cultures at the office breaking down and detaching from each other, people detaching from each other. Now they see family or the neighbors, much, even the cashier at the grocery store, much more often than they see their colleagues. So they will start chatting with the cashier and the person in the tobacco store, maybe next door, and the receptionist at the condo. So there we do have a problem that we're getting a disconnect. It's the one thing. So we probably need to make sure that people really arrive at the office in person also at like once a week or twice a week or something in order to maintain the community. And I think there is the challenge. So this all digital isn't really working in terms of cohesion. So we can't generate cohesion really on a permanent basis, but with digital alone. There is a very interesting article by Professor Petriglieri from INSEAD Fontainebleau, and he had it in, I think it's in Harvard Business or in the Financial Times, not sure. He's a professor of organizational behavior and wrote like a passionate article about the need of people to build culture together because certain things don't come across online in the digital realm that we do need for building community. It's like an anthropological type of fact that we build connections to those we are around.
So we are over a year into this pandemic. They need to make provisions and take the necessary steps for the future. So if people are saying, what do you think are the biggest learnings that you found, and what are the necessary steps to be prepared for the new challenges that are awaiting us?
What I think will be one of the first things that will come after the crisis is the rebuild. It will be a different rebuild than in the 1920s. The 2020s will be a different rebuild because it was not a war, but the destruction was different. What I think is not going to help if we just think of subsidy. I think it's going to be paramount for municipalities also on a national level to probably tap into the digital realm and see which type of business they can generate there and helping them with this process. Encouraging them, building up the awareness that there is no way out of moving digital with your business, and that this is the way that they can start generating turnover instead of continuing to be on the handout, which is also very discouraging, of course. Even if you're a business owner, it's very discouraging if you're waiting for the handout. And I think this is one of the first things that we need to mind to get off quickly from the handouts into the self-driven business opportunities. The second thing that I think will come right after this is the aftermath in the depression crisis, like psychological crisis. I think there will be a lot of attention there. And honestly, I think there you can talk about health, but as we spoke before, there possibly should be a focus on entertainment and on producing the positive vibes typical for a city. If I think of, like, for instance, I don't know, Rome and Napoli, they have these typical ways to celebrate. Let's do these parties, once they are legal again. Let's have like the street theater, or like musicians in the street, and I don't know, in the parks, have a dance and whatnot. Like whatever is typical for a city, start celebrating in public places so that people gather and start meeting. Because discussing about I don't know, about depression is not going to help them. So I think their artists, in cooperation with municipalities, can do a great deal in order to relieve this. And the interesting thing is, we don't have any blueprints. There is nothing like this worked like 100 years ago. Let's do this again. It's all new, and basically now we're also just gathering ideas that we hear or that we come up with at the institute, and in discussion with municipalities, what could work. Then the third part will be the preparation for the next crisis. The one thing is the budgets, of course, but many municipalities can start these networks between the emergency response and police and the city administration already without great budgets. So you generate this team, you put them together, and you start training. Of course, you need reserves in the ICUs and whatnot. Of course, this is an investment, but you can do already a lot without the big budgets being already awarded. In the agile movement, there is one section that is called Beyond Budgeting. And we see that many strategies, they are not being implemented because it's not in the budget structure, not because it's physically not there. We have the budget, but it's not in the structure. We have the funding for the legacy media, but we don't have a budget for social media. What you're talking about? And so then it's not happening because the fund is there, the funds are there, but they are like in the wrong silo, And so we reconsider the way we put together budgets and the way we consider budgets in order to be more flexible to respond to future challenges. So maybe that's also a way to reconsider the finances in the public arena. I think leadership training could be a thing, because we always think if you have wartime leaders and peacetime leaders, we think you just switch to the general commander role if there is a crisis, and this is not the case. The interesting thing is the most successful crisis managers are very cooperative. They have teams, and they trust the teams, and the teams know that they are trusted, and people live up to the challenge. And I think this is also something that many leaders learned, that they cannot lead by checking if the people sit at their chair. They learned that they trust that it's being delivered, whatever they asked for, and it is being delivered, and it's considered well. And I think this is something that we might see more in this arena, and that we can also train for, because like a commander in a crisis cannot do everything alone. You need your staff to collaborate, and you need to trust that the person who is in charge of the logistics will do his job. And turns out does. And I think you can train this direction also very well. And I think this will also be a good thing to try after the crisis, to prepare for the next one. What I hear in a lot of cases about, especially from the private sector, is the data security concern. Because the public administration is very wary, typically, to hand citizen data to places where they're not supposed to be stored. So I think this can be a challenge in terms of the collaboration, where patient data and health data, which is the most sensitive we have concerned. But there is a lot of other software that we can share, and also share the experience with it. Like, what did you guys do with the challenge XYZ? And they say, oh, we use this tool. And so, okay. And I think this can be much more systematic, or happen in a much more systematic manner. Like, major cities would be a brilliant place to actually be such a platform for such an exchange.
Yes, you are perfectly right. We are starting with one experiment about how managing cybersecurity. It's in progress, so I cannot tell you what are the results, but we are interviewing many cities around Europe with a specialist in cybersecurity, not me, about understanding not only about what tools they use, what works and what doesn't work, which is good, but also how to share this relevant information which are related to breaches of security, how to manage it, and how to address it. And these are things that are extremely dangerous from a city point of view. They can lose all the data of the citizens, which is not very nice. And at the same time, they can help each other a lot. Now, in the tradition of major cities of Europe, we share, what we do is sharing. But sharing in this new way, like creating communities around one topic and having some different key topics that are working on, that are sharing voluntary. I mean, we don't need to have employees doing that. We need people that are convinced that by sharing they get an advantage. And as I told you, we are trying with the first example. Maybe in some months, in a few months, we will have the first result. But you are perfectly right. Creating communities around topics that are not just listening, oh, congratulations, you did well, but are really learning and sharing from each other about useful things.
See with networks, also in the private sector, wherever, networks don't they don't start like, now we are a network. They build up, and it's like compounding in interest. The longer you do it, the more relevant it becomes. The networks grow. They're not invented or started, they grow.
That's a very good, way to end, I think, the conversation here right now. I think that we would have lots more to talk about with you, Isabella. But thanks so much for taking the time. And of course, if everybody has listened to this episode today, we hope you share this content, and of course keep on watching the next episodes that are coming up. That's all from me. I hope you keep the conversation going, as I'm always saying. And over to you, Giorgio, for last
Yes,
one.
I want to thank Isabella. It was really great discussion. I enjoyed a lot. And I would say we put the basis for a very extended program. Let's hope that it will be really implemented step by step. Thank you so much, Isabella. It was great.